What is going on, folks? Welcome into episode 15 of the Bubba Rowe Show. I'm very excited to welcome my first multi-time guest. This guy was on the program back in late February when we had our Knights roundtable talking about everything going on down at UCF with the hiring of AD Terry Mahadra and obviously head football coach Gus Malzahn when Josh Heupel went to Knoxville and took that Tennessee job. But without any further ado, welcome in from Jeff Allen Sports Talk and the Nightline Sports Network, Jeff Allen. Jeff, how are you?
Hey, Bubba, it's great to be here. Glad to be on board.
Absolutely. Appreciate you coming on as always. And I know you're an Orlando native, Orlando born and bred, and currently living in that Orlando area. So just talk about, growing up in that area, your love of UCF, and we'll dive into a lot of topics over the next 35, 40 minutes.
Yeah, being born and raised in Orlando, back in those days, it was like because in Orlando, a lot of people were from everywhere else. So being a native is kind of a neat little treat. And when I grew up in, it was interesting because we weren't much of a sports town early on, and it was a burgeoning city once Disney came into existence and people discovered Orlando and they discovered what the great state of Florida was. Things began to progress. UCF actually started as FTU, Florida Technological University, back in the late 60s, and then eventually grew and still growing today by leaps and bounds. And especially when you think about, how far UCF has come in its growth from, football going, as a Division III team all the way to Division I. During the 70s, we had a terrific Division II basketball program. Bo Clark was a great all-star shooter. I mean, if there was a three-point line, he probably would own a few of the college records. He had that kind of range. And his dad, Torchy Clark, was a legendary coach for the Knights for a very long time. And, the legacy that they started in basketball really dates back to that days. And then, UCF football came into existence in 1979. And that's where I first fell in love with UCF as a 14-year-old. Getting to go see football, and they played at the Citrus Bowl, which was then I think was called the Tangerine Bowl, and was I think had just been renovated to be a bigger size. So then we had the after in the 80s, late 80s, the push to get the NBA in Orlando was headed up by Pat Williams, and we got the Orlando Magic. And Orlando really has become a sports hotbed, if you will, ever since that time.
Yeah, your point about UCF and it being such a young university, I didn't recall exactly how young, but that was one of the things I researched when I knew we were going to have this conversation, because I knew it was nowhere close to as old as, East Carolina in 1907, when East Carolina Teachers College or East Carolina Teachers Training School was founded. But just remarkable, the growth of UCF. And we'll circle back to that later on, because like you said, it was, I think, 1963. So here in just a matter of about a week and a half, I think it's June 10th to be exact, according to what I found with a simple Google search, that UCF will be 58 years old. That's crazy.
Yeah, just a shade older than me.
But before we talk more about UCF and your love of the Knights, just talk about your love of broadcasting and working in media and where that came from.
Yeah, so I had as a kid, fell in love with sports and obviously, like a lot of us, wanted to grow up and be a professional athlete. Basketball was really my favorite sport to play. Football is my favorite sport to watch. But God did not bless me with a great jump shot and nor height. So, my love of sports, I always, followed, media and things of that nature, and figured, okay, well, I think maybe broadcasting is where I want to go with my life. And so I was attending school and got an internship at WKIS in Orlando, and they were a news talk outlet. And I managed to get an internship, and I never looked back after that. It was yeah, I was hooked immediately, just running the audio board and whatnot. And they started to grow into more sports. They had a local talk show, which had been hosted by a couple of local, one was a TV anchor, hosted for a little while. Program director of the radio station hosted it for a little while. And then under new management, they decided they wanted to grow that market a little bit. And so they managed to land a kid out of Jacksonville by the name of Chris Russo, who is Chris Mad Dog Russo today on Sirius XM, and from obviously his days at WFAN in New York. So I got to I learned most of what I know from Chris. He was it was interesting because he has that New York accent, talks really fast. It was interesting in this market. People had a hard time understanding him until they got used to him. He took some speech classes and things like that to try to help. And it was such a great experience. Chris was always, even though we were fairly close in age, he took me under his wing, and we did some at the time some pretty neat stuff. We would basically during baseball season, we'd want to get a guest, and we would back in the day, baseball had a red book and a green book, which is basically like their media guides. And so they had all the hotels listed on where the teams stay. So we would call hotels, and get Major League Baseball players on, like Dale Murphy. That was my favorite, obviously, to get on being a Braves fan. But we would just kind of push that avenue all the time. And, half the time you'd be waking people up in the afternoon and say, hey, can you come on the show? And it was really, really great. And, and Chris was so giving too, because at the time, the USFL had come into existence, and the Washington Federals moved to Orlando and became the Renegades. And Chris was on the broadcast team, and he had worked so hard, and he had actually gotten the Lakers to book Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to be a guest on our show. And Chris had to go out of town for the football broadcast, so he couldn't be on. And just to tell you what kind of a generous guy he was, I mean, he could have easily tried to reschedule that, but he said, no, Jeff, you do it. So here I am, like a, fresh-faced 19-year-old kid, interviewing one of the greatest basketball players of all time. And it might have been one of the worst interviews ever in the history of broadcasting, because Kareem was very dry, didn't have a lot to say. The only thing he did say of significance was, about that time he had talked about retiring. And I asked him, so you're really going to quit for good? He played 5 more years after that. So that was one of my favorite stories from broadcasting. But, like I said, Chris could have easily kept that for himself, but, he allowed me to do it as his producer, filling in on the show. So that's, those are some of my great broadcast memories. I learned so much about programming and all that. And was in the radio business for about 16 years, culminating with my time at WGTO, which was a 50,000 watt. We've turned it into a news talk format, and was by far my favorite broadcasting job. But we can kind of talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the Magic.
Yeah, that's absolutely a cool story regarding Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And you talk about your major influences there in broadcasting. You think of the likes of Keith Jackson, Brent Musburger, Vin Scully. I mean, there's so many different ones that you can name.
Costas,
Bob Costas, and Jim Nance. So, who were some of your major influences, guys that you really love to listen to? Jim Nance always comes up when you talk about the Masters.
Yeah, and I don't dislike Jim Nance. He's not one of my favorites, to be honest. He's, to me, a little too schmaltzy. I mean, golf is his best sport. Football, he's decent at. You could tell between the time he was paired with Phil Simms and the time he was paired with Tony Romo, Phil Simms struck him down so badly because he was so terrible. And now with Tony Romo, he's kind of gotten reinvigorated. My problem with Jim Nance comes to the fact that he, basically parachutes in for March Madness and does no college basketball during the season. And to me, I think guys like Ian Eagle and Kevin Harlan, guys that do college basketball all the season, should have that opportunity to do the Final Four. But guys,
that's a great point. I haven't really thought about that. That's a great point regarding Jim Nance and March Madness. We need more Gus Johnson.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I miss Gus Johnson. I miss Tim Brando too. And in fact, speaking of Tim Brando, he's like one of my all-time favorites because he's a great studio guy. He's great on play-by-play. He was great on the radio when he had his radio show. In fact, when he was doing national radio, he was really the only guy doing college stuff, which was awesome. So yeah, he's definitely one of the guys that I look up to, and I've been able to actually have him on the show, I think 3 times now. He's just such a wonderful guy, and one of those guys I really appreciate.
Absolutely. And we've been blessed to have Tim Brando on the Sports Objective. We'd love to have him back someday for sure. It was an excellent conversation. But, when I think of some of those excellent broadcasters we just mentioned, I brought up Keith Jackson. I think of back to my childhood watching the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day and Keith Jackson. Just those two things go together in my mind.
Oh yeah, and everybody does the Keith Jackson impersonation, right? Yeah. Touchdown, one delay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you also mentioned Brent Musburger, who's also one of my great all-time favorites. It's too bad we don't get him on a national basis anymore, because I think I think he'd still be very good. Of course, he's now doing exclusively radio for the Las Vegas Raiders play-by-play. But Brent's one of those guys, he was the godfather of Sunday NFL pregame. When you think about it, back when he had the NFL Today with Irv Cross and Jimmy the Greek and Phyllis George, and it was great. They packed a lot into a half hour, and now today, they have 3 hours of pregame with 17 guys sitting on a set, and they exhaust you mentally. But yeah, those are some of the folks that we talked about Bob Costas, and of course there's some other guys like locally that I look up to. David Steele, the voice of the Magic since the inception, one-time voice of the Florida Gators. He's a guy that I like a lot. Chip Carey worked as a play-by-play guy for the Magic for quite a while. So he's a guy that I like and respect quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I know you've had him on your program, as have we, and he was a lot of fun. Great guy to talk to.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of my favorite things that Chip Carey said on my show was that when we talked about his early days with the Magic, he goes, if Twitter had been around when I started with the Magic, I probably would not have lasted in broadcasting because he talked about how clumsy and how bad he was. He wasn't as bad as he thought, but he had to learn the ropes because he wasn't an NBA guy. He was a baseball guy. Yeah. And but to hear that kind of refreshing honesty, he said he struggled quite a bit, but he had good tutelage from guys like David Steele and his broadcast partner Jack the Goose Gibbons, the legendary Kentucky star. So that was one of my favorite stories that Chip told.
And that's one of the things he talked about on our program as well, in terms of Harry Carey and then Skip Carey. People thought he was just in the business solely because of his lineage rather than his ability.
Yeah, and you can tell that he's a guy that prepares and works very hard to do a broadcast. Watching Braves games, as I often do, he puts the work in, and he can talk analytics, he can talk old days of baseball. He's able to cover a lot of ground, which is really, really, really refreshing to hear.
It's interesting to hear that your favorite player, or at least one of your favorite players, was Dale Murphy, because that was my favorite player growing up. I remember it was so frustrating at times, when he chased that breaking ball low and away. But and then it was very disappointing to me as, I guess, about a 7-year-old when he was dealt to the Philadelphia Phillies. But fortunately, I was able to watch him play for the Phillies against the Braves. I was pulling for him, but I wanted the Braves to win, one of those deals. But since you brought up the Braves, let's just start right there, because I know you're a diehard Braves fan. As we see the tomahawk on the wall behind you, let's talk. back into the 80s, and they had some good years under Joe Torre, and then really fallen, on difficult times there for about a 6-year period. But then Bobby Cox, in his first full year back at the helm, really got things rolling. The Braves went from worst to first, and then won the division for 15 straight years. What a remarkable run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I go back as a Braves fan, to the 70s and probably the late stages of Hank Aaron's career. I remember watching him hit, both the tying home run and 715 to break Babe Ruth's record on TV. And and the Braves had some really bad teams in the 70s. And then, in the early 80s, they finally, climbed the mountain a little bit with Joe Torre, Dale Murphy, Bob Horner, who was one of my other all-time favorite Braves. Boy, he could get on a hot streak and carry a team for a long time. And then, after that little run that went quiet, as you said, and then Bobby Cox came back, but first as the general manager. And, he built the farm system, acquired all these players, the John Smoltz trade, and did a lot to refortify the infrastructure of the Braves. Chuck Tanner was managing them at that time. And I remember getting both Bobby Cox and Chuck Tanner's autograph on an old Braves cap back in the day when the Braves actually played the Twins at Tinker Field during spring training. The Bobby comes back downstairs after they bring John Sherholtz in, and the worst of first year was so incredible, and really, to me, the big thing that really kind of ignited that was defense. They brought over Terry Pendleton, who ended up being a tremendous hitter during his time with the Braves. Otis Nixon in center field, they really fortified the defense. Belliard at shortstop. So, they figured, okay, we've got this pitching. If we can support them, we'll be able to, to build this team. So yeah, the run that they went on, gosh, just so many great memories. My favorite one being probably the Sid Bream slide at home when they beat the Pirates in Game 7 on the Francisco Cabrera base hit. In fact, I used the play-by-play call from Skip Carey. That was my outgoing message on my answering machine for a long time thereafter. Yes, remember what an answering machine was?
Oh, yeah.
So that was such an amazing time. And to finally break through, win the World Series in '95 against Cleveland. That was just such so amazing, especially when, Dave Justice got on the fan base. And he ends up delivering, backing it up with the big home run, and Tom Glavine pitching a tremendous gem for them to in the deciding game to finally win the World Series. I would have loved to thought they could have capitalized a few more. The Yankee situation. They were up in that series. What was it? Jim Leyritz hit the big home run that turned that series around. It kind of would be nice if they could have gotten two more championships. But then again, if you tell a sports fan, okay, your team's going to be in the playoffs for 15 straight years, who's going to argue with that, right? At least you got a chance to dance.
Yeah, very much so. Down through the years, you kind of obviously, it was 15 times rather than just the trips the Buffalo Bills had to the Super Bowl, but in a kind of similar sense, the Braves were kind of like the Buffalo Bills of Major League Baseball in terms that they got there so much and just were able to win that one World Series. But like you said, it could have been a lot worse for sure. But it's funny you brought up that tremendous storybook finish to that NLCS against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Those are two of my most prized possessions. I have a pair of autographed baseball cards by Francisco Cabrera because it was somebody that I grew up playing Little League Baseball with.
Wow.
That somehow had a connection to Francisco Cabrera and was nice enough to get those cards autographed for me.
Oh man, that is pretty cool. And yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things about baseball is, you have these things come up where you have the unlikely hero in a pivotal moment in a championship. It's just, it is quite incredible. And and Sid Bream, when I think of that memory of that, it's in slow motion because Sid Bream was so slow. Thank God Barry Bonds did not have a good arm.
Yep, no doubt. And the pitching staffs through those years, and just under the tutelage of Leo Mazzoni, just unbelievable. I mean, you think of John Smoltz, Tom Glavine, who was also a tremendous hockey player.
Yep.
That's something a lot of people may not realize. I'm sure the diehard fans do. And then you had Steve Avery, who unfortunately, battled some different things, and maybe his career wasn't quite as good as it could have been, but he's a tremendous pitcher in his own right. And then when Maddox came over from the Cubs, just so many unbelievable arms. Mark Wohlers out of the bullpen. And then you had the infamous John Rocker back around the time I was finishing high school. I remember he had that the little run-in with the New York Mets where the fans in New York were throwing batteries and drinks and so forth at him.
Yeah, it's too bad that his mouth got him, into so much trouble, because he had great stuff. I mean, he was a terrific reliever, and you got to have that cockiness to be a closer and be a really good closer. But I think he was one of those guys that carried it a little bit too far. But yeah, you talk about that pitching staff. It's like, yeah, and they were pretty good with Glavine and Smoltz, but let's go ahead and get Greg Maddox.
Yeah.
And you would, and I was watching, the Braves had their alumni weekend this past weekend. And one of the guests they rotated through the broadcast was Denny Nagel, who came in later on, former Pittsburgh Pirate pitcher. And he had some good seasons with the Braves. And they asked him about being on that pitching staff with, the three Hall of Famers. And he said, yeah, it was wonderful because, Max would come pitch his 2-hour game. Smoltz would come in and throw 98. And then Glavine would just be so stubborn and just, make ground ball after ground ball. He's like, God, when I got up the pitch, I knew, man, I can't be the weak link here. So, the way those guys competed, made each other better. And that certainly was one of the all-time great pitching staffs in baseball history.
And you talk about Terry Pendleton, I believe, if I recall correctly. I know he had been with the Cardinals. I think that's where was that where he came from?
He was with the Cardinals, and he was on their championship teams in the 80s. So, he was the guy that kind of brought that leadership that they needed.
Like you're saying, and he obviously went on to coach with the Braves as well. Terry Pendleton, you think of switch hitter. He's almost like, just his build, maybe not somebody you just look at, hey, he's the most talented guy physically, but he got the most out of his ability. Swung it well from both sides of the plate. Would field well, obviously, at third as well. And then you look in the middle, you mentioned Rafael Belliard, but then you also had Jeff Blauser and the Limmer, Mark Lemke.
Mr. October.
Mark Lemke, he didn't necessarily have a tremendous bat, but he got some huge hits and found a way to get it done in the clutch for sure. And then one of my favorite memories is when Fred McGriff came over. When they acquired the Crime Dog, and then he became the Fire Dog very quickly because of the fire at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. One of those first few games, and maybe his very first game that he played in the Braves uniform.
And then the team went on a hot streak right after that of great proportions. So yeah, it was Crime Dog was definitely one of those guys that he was a tremendous player, and he always had timely hits too. He was a very clutch player.
And speaking of another switch hitter at the top of that lineup, Otis Nixon, stealing all those bases. He's a North Carolina native. And then you also, a guy I don't think we've mentioned yet, maybe you did, Ron Gant.
Yeah, Ronnie Gant too. When you look at what Ronnie Gant did, he was a 5-tool player. I mean, he could hit for power. He had the speed. He was great defensively. He was a tremendous player, and he's one of those guys. If he'd have played a long time, he might have amassed Hall of Fame numbers.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, kind of shifting gears from MLB, I know you have a very strong background with the Orlando Magic that we've already referenced a little bit, but just talk about that. And the Magic came into existence in 1989. What's your relationship with that franchise? Going back to those early years before the Magic. There I think it was about 92 or 93 when they started contending for the NBA championship.
Yeah, and I'll give you a little backstory as well, because in the mid '80s, one of the guests we got on Chris Russo's show was NBA Commissioner David Stern, and so as I'm getting the commissioner on the phone, he says, "Hey, before you put me on, Jeff, I got a question for you." And I'm you obviously okay. He goes, "How do you think NBA basketball would do in Orlando?" And I'm like, "Well, of course, I'm a young kid. I'm a Laker fan at that my life, and and the Lakers are in the '80s were one of the great teams in NBA history." And so, I'm as a kid growing up in Orlando who's dying for professional sports to be in town. Oh, Commissioner Stern, this would be a great market. You have so many NBA fans here, blah, 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 blah. Well, I can't take credit for the Magic coming to Orlando, but Pat Williams, he was approached by a local businessman, Jimmy Hewitt, who had the idea to bring the NBA to Orlando, and asked Pat, "Hey, what would you think about the NBA and being down in Florida?" And Pat said to him, "Yeah, Tampa or Miami would be pretty good." And he goes, "No, I'm talking about Orlando." And Pat kind of paused and stepped back for a moment, and Jimmy Hewitt, convinced Pat that this was the thing. And Pat was, the GM of the Philadelphia 76ers at the time. So he's able to get Pat Williams to spearhead the efforts of getting the NBA in Orlando, because they started the plans for expansion. And they originally were only going to take 3 teams in that initial run. And Pat Williams, who, he was the dog and pony, the carnival barker, one of the radio jobs I had in the late '80s after WKIS, Pat would just call the radio stations, and say, "Hey, you got time to put me on? I want to talk about the drive to get the basketball team in Orlando." And so he would come on and he would push, the ticket donations and this, that, and the other. So lo and behold, the Magic did such a great job. The NBA decided, you know what? We can't leave one of these teams off the table. We're going to bring in 4. So, the other 4 being Charlotte, Minnesota, Miami, in addition to Orlando. So that's how that came about. And initially, the radio job I had at the time, we weren't really doing a lot of sports. So the very first season of the Magic, me and 3 of my buddies, we bought season tickets. We bought 2 seats and split the games between us. And the expansion team was so much fun to watch. They had assembled a cast of characters because, basically they had the expansion draft, and basically the players left unprotected, kind of took it as a slight. So they pick up guys like Dave Corzine, Scott Skiles, who's a legend in Magic history. Sidney Green, former New York Knick, guys like that nature. And they draft a kid by the name of Nick Anderson out of Illinois. And interestingly enough, the very first preseason game, they're playing the world champion Detroit Pistons. And this is how I met Chip Carey for the first time, was that evidently one of the stat people didn't show up for Sunshine Network, which was the broadcast outlet. And so a buddy of mine that I worked in radio with comes over to my seat and said, "Hey man, we need somebody. Can you come help us out?" So lo and behold, I'm going down and keeping stats courtside with Chip and the Goose, and the Magic play the Detroit Pistons. They come back late to win. It's only a preseason game, but nobody cared. That arena was rocking like it was a championship atmosphere. I can still hear that sound in my head today. It was just amazing. And they win that game, and boy, you could have set the town on fire. It was that good. And the only other time I heard it that loud again would be during the regular season, when the Magic had an early season date with the Los Angeles Lakers and Magic Johnson, and his running mate from days gone by that he grew up with, Sam Vincent, was one of our point guards. And Sam Vincent played like a man possessed in the fourth quarter. The Magic rallied to win and beat the Lakers. And again, pandemonium. And the Magic, I think, went 7-7. And we're thinking, oh my God, this expansion team might make the playoffs.
Yeah.
But eventually reality set in, and they, I think, would win maybe 18 or 19 games that season, all told. But the formation of what they started then grew, and they drafted well under with Pat Williams and his assistant John Gabriel. They drafted Dennis Scott, 3D, who gave them the outside shooting, and then they drafted Shaq, and then they drafted Penny Hardaway, which initially was not a popular pick because everybody wanted Chris Webber, and they did draft Chris Webber, but they made the trade. I believe it was Golden State, and so they bring the trade. And Penny was really recruited to the Magic by Shaq because they did the movie Blue Chips together, and Shaq got on the phone with him saying, "Man, this kid Penny, he's next level. He's going to take us places." And sure enough, that turned out to be very, very true as they built the team. And then they added the missing piece when Horace Grant became a free agent from the Chicago Bulls, and the Magic added him. And then they became title contenders. And it was just such an amazing thing to see. They end up beating the Chicago Bulls in their run to the 95 finals. And Jordan had just come back from his exile to baseball. And those memories are just so etched into my mind. Getting to cover them as a member of the media was fantastic. We were on the competing station that carried the Magic games, and we wanted the Magic really bad. So we said, you know what, we're going to cover them like they are already on our station. So I did a pregame show on game nights prior to the Magic. We would actually got the Magic's public address announcer, who was a Tampa Bay radio personality, Paul Porter. He would do our locker room interviews before the game and send them back to me in the studio. And then we would also, we got a remote site near the arena and started doing our show from there. So it was always a blast and always a lot of fun. And then came the time when the radio rights were up for the Magic, and we got in contention. Now, we were not a highly rated station, but we had a 50,000 watt signal, which that's gold in broadcasting. But we ran the station with a very small staff. We all wore different hats. We hustled and I was the program director, the sports director, co-host of the morning show, doing the Magic thing. I was working 15 hours a day, but loving every minute of it. And, it came time to when the Magic were up for grabs. Our ownership came up from Fort Myers, pardon me, and they met with the Magic, and one of our guys, there was the owner, and he was started to intimate that we would pay them to get them on. Of course, he had the lowest percentage of ownership, so those are usually the guys that offer the money, and one of his cohorts kicked him under the table and stopped that from happening. And then I found out, the Magic ultimately decided to go with the local news talk station in town. But I did find out later, and actually it was years later, somebody that worked for the Magic confirmed to me that you guys were that close to getting the rights to the Magic. I mean, it was, and we always thought at the time, but to hear that finally confirmed was kind of rewarding, right, in a way. And but getting to cover the Magic as a member of the media, and going in the locker room, doing the interviews, talking to the coaches. Brian Hill was one of the all-time class guys. It was too bad that him and Penny had their rift and Penny ran him out of town. But those are days that are very, very fond to me, and I'll always remember.
So you talk about that rift between Penny and then Coach Brian Hill. During those years, you referenced, playing for the NBA title in 94-95 that season, and coming up shy against the Houston Rockets. And then the next year, I think lost in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Chicago Bulls in 95-96. but just talk about when that era came to an end, and Shaq went to the Lakers. Refresh me, since that's been, it's hard to believe, but a quarter century now. What exactly was the situation there? Was it just a matter of LA being the highest bidder? Or was there a falling out of sorts, or what?
Well, there's an interesting story there, and to think back too that that series they lost against the Rockets, they were winning game 1, and Nick Anderson missed 4 free throws down the stretch that allowed Houston to come back and win that game. If the Magic win game 1, that might be a different series. They might have won the championship. But when it came time, for Shaq's contract to come up, Leonard Amardo was Shaq's agent. And there was a lot of jostling going around between him and the Magic, and the Magic lowballed him to some extent. And then there was an infamous poll in the Orlando Sentinel. Is Shaquille O'Neal worth $100 million? And the poll said no. Now, I think people were going from the aspect, okay, really no athlete is worth, and we're talking about 100 million at that time, which is probably 250 now. I think at that point they're thinking, okay, nobody's worth 100 million. That's insane. But that did hurt Shaq's feelings, and that did cause the problem. And his agent wanted him in LA. There was no secret to that. Because he wanted Shaq's endorsements and the potential of doing movies, although he was terrible in Shazam. That really was such a breaking point for the Magic to lose Shaq, and that affected Penny in a great deal of way. Penny wasn't equipped to be the guy, as far as everybody's looking to him to be the leader of the team. Penny liked deferring to Shaq in that instance, and as those problems wore on and his relationship with Ryan Hill deteriorated, it was very tough to watch. And when I think back about Penny Hardaway, if you go back and look at old film of Penny Hardaway, the things he did were ahead of its time. I thought he was so dynamic. If he had not gotten hurt, knee injury ultimately led to his problems, he might have gone down as one of the all-time greats. He would throw Pistol Pete type passes. He could dunk. He could shoot threes. He was a pretty decent defender too, for a guy who had so much offense in his game, and with his size could chip in on the board. So he was such a great all-around player. And it was so sad that that came to an end. And really, the Magic had a short period of time where they were down, but then they managed to regroup under Doc Rivers with the Heart and Hustle teams that were led by Darrell Armstrong and Bo Outlaw, and now Hall of Famer Ben Wallace. Basically earning that off his days with the Detroit Pistons to be the Defensive Player of the Year. But those days, as fun as they were, weren't the days of Shaq and Penny. So yeah, it was tough and bittersweet. And then we've had a lot of years of bad basketball throughout the 2000s. So we think about the glory days a lot.
Yeah, here in North Carolina, we certainly had our share of bad basketball as well, with the Bobcats and now the Hornets again. Since the Hornets made that decision to George Shinn and the company moved the franchise to New Orleans, where they were of course, the New Orleans Hornets and now the Pelicans. But just talking about these memories of the things that you experienced with the Magic, it reminds me of, yes, I was familiar with those things, but, here in North Carolina, the Hornets got pretty competitive fairly quickly. In those initial teams, you had guys like Kelly Tripucka and certain ones that you remember, Muggsy Bogues, but then you had very quickly Larry Johnson. In addition to LJ, you had
Grandmama.
You had Grandmama, and then you had Zoe, Alonzo Mourning out of Georgetown, and they got Charlotte combined with a tremendous atmosphere at the Hive, the old Charlotte Coliseum, which was imploded several years ago, which really blew my mind. It was only around about 20 years. But
our first one only lasted 20.
Crazy, different era for arenas for sure. But kind of shifting gears now. I know your favorite NFL team's the Dallas Cowboys, and there had been so much continuity with Tom Landry, and then you had Jimmy Johnson coming in, took over a pretty tough situation, and then went one win team, and then but very quickly turned into a Super Bowl contender. So what are some of your excellent memories that you have of the Cowboys, and when exactly did you become a Cowboys fan?
Well, I was a Cowboy fan from a very young age. My parents actually lived in Dallas in 1960 before I was born when the team started. And so they started rooting for the Cowboys. So that's how I got indoctrinated, even though I was born and raised in Orlando. And of course, I'm a huge Roger Staubach fan, a huge Drew Pearson fan who's finally in the Hall of Fame. That should have happened years ago. But thankfully, he'll get to do it while he's still alive. And we'll get to see him this summer with his acceptance speech. And Roger's going to do the intro as it should be. And of course, they had the great Hail Mary pass that beat Minnesota in 75 in the playoffs. And they had some tremendous battles with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the late 70s, lost both those games, but they were epic battles. And of course, the Cowboys won a couple Super Bowls in the 70s as well. And then after Roger retired because of concussions, the team still played decently well. Danny White was the quarterback. They got the 3 straight NFC championship games, so couldn't get over the hump. They were defeated by Dwight Clark with the catch from Joe Montana, although the Cowboys had the ball after that, and Drew Pearson was basically a breakaway tackle from the Cowboys winning that game. So then the hard times, things started going south for Tom Landry, and Jerry Jones bought the team, and he made the move to Jimmy Johnson. And it was not popular to fire a man of Tom Landry's stature, and bring probably some with a college football coach. But Jimmy Johnson was a great college football coach, and he came in, and they labored through a 1-15 season, but they went and drafted and built the team. They traded Herschel Walker for a ton of draft picks, and I think they hit on just about every one of those that turned out to be contributors on their Super Bowl teams. And then that run of 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons, Barry Switzer winning one of those. It was an amazing time. They had the triplets with Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, who goes down as one of my all-time favorite Cowboys, and Michael Irvin. They had the great defense with Charles Haley and Ken Norton Jr. and boy, there was just so many great players that ended up being on those football teams. And they could have won 4 in a row had there not been the rift between Jerry and Jimmy, which also, by the way, started here in Orlando. Because it was infamous only at one point that during the NFL owners meetings, Jerry had an adult beverage too many, and said, "Well, I can find anybody to coach the Cowboys," and the beginning of the end started there. So those were great times with the Cowboys, and as I like to say, I'm a longtime Dallas Cowboys apologist. It's been tough to be a fan since those days, and I think as much as Jerry Jones wants to win, he just gets in the way too daggone much. I think Bill Parcells had them poised to be back in contending year after year had he not forced Terrell Owens down Parcells' throat. So, hopefully they're on their way back. Jason Garrett was just a 500 football coach, just couldn't get over the hump. I love him as a person. I think he's a great guy. I just kind of wish it would have worked out for him there, but be interesting to see. They're paying Dak Prescott a lot of money now, and I love Dak Prescott. I think he is going to be continuing to get better, and hopefully his injury won't hold him back. But I've been longing for them to get back to the Super Bowl for a very long time.
Yeah, a lot of excellent memories of those Super Bowls in the early 90s. Robert Jones first round draft choice of the Cowboys, as you certainly remember.
Yep.
It was on East Carolina's 11-1 1991 team. He had some excellent years with Dallas. Steele was obviously a huge Cowboys fan and lived out there in Texas, in Austin, for the longest time. John Jett, punter, was a Pirate, and then also you had guys like Vincent Smith, who had played for East Carolina.
Hey,
in the 1980s.
one of my favorite Cowboys was an East Carolina guy too, Dwayne Harris, when he played.
No doubt.
Back a few years back with the Cowboys. I like to call him Big Play Dwayne, because he always came up with a big punt return or a big catch. He definitely was one of my favorites.
Yeah, Dwayne Harris, certainly a playmaker. I believe this was actually after he had moved on and he was with the Raiders when they were still in Oakland. Do you remember that one where he picked it up at the 1 yard line?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yep.
Crazy. But he was one of those, you certainly didn't want to go to the restroom when he was, now during his professional career, when he was still very much active and making plays. But during his time as a Pirate from 2006 to 2010, during those years, he was, a play waiting to happen. And some of the tackles that he broke on just his strength. And no, he wasn't a 4.2 guy like Chris Johnson, but he had very good speed and, that combination of speed and power.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
I mean, I remember times, and one specifically against NC State, where he literally about had his helmet ripped off, and he kept going and had about a 25-yard punt return. Coach Ruffin McNeil's first year in 2010, and the Pirates knocked off the Wolfpack.
No, he's just one of those guys you just classify as a football player,
Yeah, no doubt about it. We talked about your love of the UCF Knights coming back full circle. Let's talk about the football program. You talked about those years being Division III and very quickly rose D2, FCS, or 1AA as it was at the time. And then after not being 1AA all that many years, you had the likes of Dante Culpepper, one of the guys that immediately comes to mind when I think of UCF football. And then right there about 95, 96,
yep.
It became 1A as what is now known as FBS.
Yeah. We talked about, the team starting in 79 and, early in those early years, the team we couldn't beat was Bethune-Cookman. and we finally did it with a long Eddie O'Brien field goal. And I think that's really where we started to move up from there. In 1AA, we had a big playoff win over Youngstown State, who was a long time dominant program in 1AA. But yeah, as you mentioned, 95, that's really when things had changed. With Dante Culpepper, and the time of the late 90s and early 2000s, UCF was on that so close track. They were taking a lot of paydays to go play at Georgia Tech, Clemson, Penn State, South Carolina, you name the team, and we had Georgia Tech beat twice. We had Georgia beat until an infamous offensive pass interference was called on us by an SEC official. They gave Clemson a game, but it was always one of those. It was just so tough because you knew we were right on the cusp. We were just a little off size wise. When you play these big powerhouse programs, you see the difference in the O line and the D line. And me and my best friend Keith, we would go to a lot of these road games, and it was so tough because all the fans from the other team, man, you guys play so hard, good job by you guys, and we got tired of hearing that, because it's like we want to win.
Absolutely, we're not here for a moral victory.
Yeah, so that got to be difficult, and so. The program continued to build and they went through, G. McDowell was the coach, and and G. McDowell was the guy that saved UCF football, by the way, because before he was hired, the Knights hired former NFL coach Lou Saban, and Lou Saban was no Nick Saban. And he was used to being a professional coach, and he just spent UCF's money like it was going out of style and didn't build the program. And they were in massive debt. But Gene McDowell, with his ties to Florida State and things like that, he's the guy that saved the program. He got the fundraising right. People like Burt Reynolds were contributing to our program.
Wow.
So if not for Gene McDowell, we would not be talking about UCF football today. The program would have been dead. And then, of course, they had a little bit of a scandal with a cell phone situation that violated NCAA rules, and Gene McDowell had tipped off the players regarding that, and so he was let go. Mike Krusick, his assistant, former Pittsburgh Steele quarterback, tremendous offensive coordinator, pretty decent head coach. He did a pretty good job, but was not able to advance the program to the next level. So then, George O'Leary becomes available because of the infamous resume bugaboo at Notre Dame.
Right.
He goes and coaches a year up in Minnesota with the Vikings, and he is hired. And George O'Leary builds the program. Now, it was also very frustrating because we'd have 1 year up and 1 year down, 1 year up, 1 year down. But we would, start to win some championships in Conference USA at the time. And we got the football stadium built on campus. We got Texas to come in for our first game. And so that's really when things started to happen. And then, so George O'Leary built the program. And then unfortunately he started just as dynamically as he started with a winless season. And, in his last season, the athletic director had left. They asked him to take on the role. He tried to do both. And then he ended up doing neither. And then we were at a crossroads. And so Danny White's hired as the athletic director, and he hires Scott Frost. And man, our lives have been so much better ever since. Just to see, it took Frost, just 2 years to get the program turned around. Getting 6 wins in the first season was like a euphoric step for us. And then we finally, break down the barrier. We get the New Year's Six bid. We claim a national championship. And we do so partly tongue in cheek, but partly because, we want to say, kind of give the finger to the college football playoff committee. What an amazing ride that was. And then Josh Heupel continuing that the season after. So they won 25 straight games, which is hard to do in college football, no matter what level you're at. And, and go to a second New Year's Six bowl. And, and if we'd just had Mackenzie Milton, I think we beat LSU. That said, it's been a little, we're in a little bit of a down period. I think COVID had a lot to do with impacting our season a year ago, but, you can't discount what Cincinnati's done. Luke Fickell has done an amazing job there and has built a nice program. So yeah, just the over the last 20 years, you look at where we've come from and what we've become and what we can still be and still become, because with Gus Malzahn's hiring, Terry Bahaj's new athletic director, there's a lot of enthusiasm happening here right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Going back to the George O'Leary era and just looking over those numbers that you referenced, in his 12 years there in Orlando, 04 to 15, I was trying to think of other college football coaching tenures that may have paralleled that at all. I never thought of a coach, whose time at a school was bookended by winless seasons. It was just crazy. And then he had 4 10+ win seasons. Just unheard
yeah,
of.
It is pretty crazy. Like I said, it was up 1 year, down the next. It was almost a model of inconsistency. Although the last few years of his tenure, before the end, there was some consistency there. We won the right. Fiesta Bowl. Yeah. That was a tremendous football team with Blake Bortles and Storm Johnson. on the offense, and JJ Wharton, who made an amazing catch in the Temple game. That's still one of my all-time favorite catches. And that 2013 season was very interesting as well, because they started off the season at Penn State, and my buddy Keith and I have gone to. They've been up there 3 times, so we've been to every game up there because his family's up in Pennsylvania, so we have places to stay and all that. And beating Penn State was kind of a culmination for us, because like we finally got one of these dang road wins. This is fabulous. We beat a big team on the road, and that season ended up being remarkable. They were the Cardiac Knights. They snatched defeat from the jaws of victory several times. Took a fumble on special teams to beat Memphis. Had to go down to the wire against Houston. Had to go down to the wire against South Florida. But that was an amazing season, and was our best one until the 2017 team.
Yeah, no doubt. That 2014 season, as you know where I'm going with this. There was a very famous play in UCF history that I would really like to forget. But I'll go ahead and go there. The Hail Mary to win the conference championship.
Well, let me correct you. They call it Hail Perryman down here.
Yes, Hail Perryman. I was trying to think of it, and I couldn't remember. I think that's a sign of how much I was trying to.
I get it. The
block Brashad Perryman's feet out of my mind. And the thing that made it so sickening for me, Jeff, and I will go here that night sitting in the stadium. We hadn't defended the deep ball well all year, and I told my dad when we handled that coaching staff, which did a lot of great things, made the mistake of handling that series the way they did in terms of not trying to score, and went backwards, losing about 15 to 20 yards of field position. I said, I don't like this. So we're going to give them enough time to, throw an out, maybe 2, and then have a Hail Mary. And we hadn't defended the deep ball. I said, I'm not feeling very good about this. And then, unfortunately, my fears came true.
I think you can make a case that might have been the worst case of clock management ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
take a knee and then lose.
Yeah. That was that was brutal from your guys' perspective. I do admit that. There's a lot of luck that goes into that, and I vividly remember that night too, because I was, it was a Thursday night, and the Cowboys were on that night playing the Bears. So I had 2 screens going, and we're beating the crap out of the Bears. So it's like, oh, okay, well, at least we'll get one of these games. So that'll be all right. Well, and then,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And then of course, there was a very important completion right before the final pass that got them just enough room for Holman, who had a big arm. I mean, he's probably one of the few guys that can throw the ball like that. And the fact that that your guys misjudged the flight of the ball was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, part of the thing there, when we put a guy that had tremendous athleticism, who was more of a linebacker though. He was, I want to say, about 6'4", and very athletic, but he wasn't used to, defending passes in space like that. And, to East Carolina defensive coordinator Rick Smith's credit, he said that was on me. I should have put Cam Worthy, who was a very talented East Carolina receiver of about 6'4" or so. He's used to making the play on a jump ball like that. I should have put him back there, but hey, it is what it is. And the Knights made the play and Pirates didn't, but just unbelievable.
Yeah. And Justin Holman, who, had he followed Blake Bortles a quarterback. So that was a tall order, and he was a decent quarterback. I mean, but he wasn't Blake Bortles.
Right.
But he had an amazing cannon for an arm. I mean, I'm almost surprised he didn't overthrow, because that was one of his biggest problems, overthrowing guys. But Perriman, he knew right where the ball was going, so he had seen enough of those throws to know where to be.
When that ball was coming down, it seemed like it was in slow motion. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah, no question. In fact, I let off such a big yell. My wife came running from the other corner of the house. What's the matter? What's the matter? and then George O'Leary, he just looked. He was being escorted by
by the sheriff or, policeman. And he just looked at him. He was just the look on his face. He was in total disbelief, as we all were.
Yeah. It was a pretty unbelievable moment. That's for dang sure.
But, going back to present, you referenced Gus Malzahn's tenure, which began several months back at the beginning of this year. And obviously he accomplished so much on the Plains before Auburn decided to part ways with him. Just such high expectations there. And they felt things had grown stale, but their loss was certainly UCF's gain. And I think personally, as good of a football coach as Josh Heupel may be, I think UCF is probably in a better situation right now.
That's I think that's kind of the prevailing thought around here as well. Josh Heupel was kind of falling out of favor with the fan base. And right or wrong, he's got an incredible coaching record to speak for. But last year was a frustrating season. Again, I think COVID does impact part of that. But Josh Heupel, the thing with I think frustrates the fan base is he's a little hard-headed. Now, a lot of head coaches are, but he is definitely insistent on this. And the fast-paced offense is fantastic when it's humming and it's working. But if you have any hiccups in that, and you start going 3 and out, you're killing your defense. So I think that's one of the frustrating things was, and he would constantly, run the same play over and over again, a quick hitch to the sideline or runs up the middle with very small running backs who were tough as nails, but just the same, there's a lot of frustration there. In fact, to kind of talk about the difference a little bit, I didn't get to go to our spring game, but one of my buddies did. And he texted me. He says, "We threw a pass to a tight end." And then there's a little pause in the middle of the field. and I'm like, is that allowed? Because we never did that. So I'm excited to see what Gus will bring. He was the offensive coordinator at Auburn when Cam Newton was there.
Right.
He's getting a great quarterback to work with. He's probably better than any quarterback he's had at Auburn.
Yeah, definitely.
In Dylan Gabriel. So he's got a toolbox to work with. I think they'll keep some aspects of that fast-paced offense, but I think there's going to be a little more physicality brought in. I think that's going to be a very big big thing that happens there. They brought in Isaiah Bowser, bruising running back from Northwestern. And that's the big thing too. We talk about in our conference, SMU has, Sonny Dykes has lived on the transfer portal to build his team back up. Right.
Right.
And then, and now, a guy like Gus Malzahn's got the cachet to get some of these guys, Big Cat Bryant out of Auburn, another big name coming in, Jordan Johnson for Notre Dame, a receiver. So yeah, I think bringing in with the talent that already exists, and the fact that he will recruit the state of Florida, which Josh Heupel did not do a very good job of. I think there's only like 4 in the last recruiting class from the state. That can't happen.
Interesting.
We got to. This is a hotbed. 3 stars in Florida are still pretty doggone good.
Right. As much talent as there is in the Sunshine State, that blows my mind. The most recent class only had 4.
Yeah, I think that's the number. So yeah, that was in fact, I think I mentioned it on the roundtable that I was on with you guys. It was like somebody had talked to a coach at in my area at Apopka High School, and had mentioned Gus Malzahn had come to visit, and he goes, "Well, that's one more time that Josh Heupel did." So
interesting. And the thing is, Jeff, I mean, not to cut you off there, but
yeah.
Having won 25 games in a row at one point, going back to the Frost era, and all that success, I'm sure a lot of UCF fans like yourself were thinking, well, if we've had all this success and we're still not recruiting any better than this in state, then when will this staff recruit well in state?
Yeah, and I think one of the fears that people had was, because, we thought after winning the Fiesta Bowl in 13, that would be kind of a door opening, and we didn't take advantage of that. And people were thinking, okay, we've got the 17 and 18 run, and people thinking, why are we not taking advantage of this? So I think now with the new regime in there, they're gonna try to go with that, and just to see the enthusiasm. They're doing what they call the Charge On Tour, where they go around the state to different areas, invite UCF fans to come out and meet coaches. Johnny Dawkins, along with Coach Malzahn and Terry Mahajer obviously is going on these trips, and you can just see the enthusiasm building because people are excited. I think Gus is excited. Like, coaching at Auburn has got to be like a big pain in the backside when you think about Terry Bowden was let go by Auburn, and he was a damn good football coach. But if they're boosters, if they sour on you, they're looking to go another direction. And Gus beat Alabama enough. It's not like they got pummeled by Alabama every year.
Right.
So
what do you want, about maybe 35 to 40% of the time or something?
Which is better than anybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
So if they, if that ends up being our game, hallelujah.
No doubt about it. And one more football question before switch gears and start to wind the conversation down. But going back to getting Gus Malzahn and just taking a look at this program, just talk about, you touched on it a little bit. You said you didn't have a chance to go to the spring game, but I heard some of the players just talking about how the organization of a Gus Malzahn practice relative to a Josh Heupel practice. Yeah,
I think that was a very telling statement when you look at that. And I think it kind of goes down to, Josh Heupel believes, okay, my system works and my guys are better than yours. But that works a lot. But when you get punched in the mouth, sometimes it doesn't work. So I don't think he ever had one of the biggest criticisms was in-game adjustments. That was always a big bugaboo when teams were able to turn the tide on UCF. And I think, that comes down to playing in an organization, does it not? You got to have a backup plan. You have your game plans, but you got to know how to adjust, and being organized allows you to adjust. So yeah, I think that's a very, very telling statement in regards to that. And then, we had that dynamic too. And I don't know how much involved Gus is going to be with the defense, but it was basically Josh Heupel with the offense, Randy Shannon, you deal with the defense, and Heupel had nothing to do with that. And, and I think my biggest thing, I always thought that Josh Heupel, especially if he just remained this year, I thought he should give up being the OC and concentrate solely on being the head coach, because it's hard to do all of that together. And now I get it, because Scott Frost did it both while he was here too. And I get that, initially when you start, because you want to set the tone, you want to build it the way you want it to work. But I think at some point you have to turn the reins over to an OC to run the offense and concentrate on the bigger picture at the top of the mountain. And I think that's what we're going to get now with Gus.
Yeah, that will certainly be interesting to see for sure, because I know at his introductory press conference, and he was saying that he would be more involved offensively than he had been in recent years at Auburn. But at the same time, I'm sure letting his coaches coach, not being a micromanager by any means. But, you referenced Johnny Dawkins in the basketball program, I guess a couple years ago now. You had the situation where the Knights make the tournament and what really had Duke on the ropes and weren't quite able to seal the deal. But just give us a very quick general overview of the basketball program and where you see things headed.
Well, yeah, and I guess it's only fair that I have to relive a bad memory
Yeah.
since you had to relive one, because you know, UCF actually got their first ever tournament win against VCU, which was a big accomplishment. And then to play Duke the way they did and be right on the edge, BJ Taylor, when he put that shot up in, I thought it was going in because we saw him do it 1,000 times. And
As did
then,
I.
yeah. And then when the ball comes off the rim and you see Aubrey Dawkins about to tap it in, and I'm just like waiting to let out the scream, and it just doesn't happen. And, to come so close. It was it's bittersweet because, it was great that they took Duke all the way down to the end. But again, we hate moral victories. As far as the basketball program goes, I like what Johnny Dawkins is doing. He's building the program. It was a great run they had, with BJ Taylor, Aubrey, Taco Fall, Antonio Davis's son. You think about, it's tough to do that in this conference right now. Houston's such a dominant force, and they're gonna be for a while. Cincinnati, had their run, but now they're kind of hitting the skids. But I do like what Dawkins is doing. He's bringing in good transfers. He's got some good, sharpshooters. He likes to have a post presence, and I see he's building things. And I think towards the end of the last season, the COVID pause wrecked it for a lot of teams. When it hit us, it took us a while to get back from it. But I think at the end of the season, they were playing their best ball, and they were and made a little bit of noise in the tournament, but the conference tournament, that is. But now I think getting we hopefully think will be a full normal season. I'm excited to where things are going to go, and Coach Dawkins has a nice, cool, firm hand, and he knows what he's doing. And we're definitely excited with what he's doing with hoops.
On the diamond, right now you have the American Athletic Baseball Tournament going on over in Clearwater. I'm not too awfully far from you. I guess about an hour and 15, 20 minutes. But Greg Lovelady and the Knights. So much talent on this team. They've been up and down all season long. Took 2 out of 3. Very easily could have swept Ole Miss, who was number 1 at the time, and will be one of the 16 host sites for NCAA regional. Just a tremendous program there in Oxford. So that was a huge feather in the hat. Then they split a series at East Carolina, who was ranked in the top 10 at the time. What a just power surge over in Clearwater these last 2 days, first 2 games of the tournament. Mm-hmm. 31 runs and nine home runs.
Yeah, I hope they haven't used them all up because because they're going to need those. But yeah, they had 7 home runs today. Rathbone hit a monster shot yesterday. Hit a grand slam today. Things are working good right now. But yeah, you mentioned it. The Knights have been up and down all season. After the series with East Carolina, they dropped the series to Tulane. Now Tulane's a pretty good team, so that's not terrible, but just the same, they've had a hard time being consistent. Maybe they're getting hot at the right time. So far, the first 2 games of the conference tournament have definitely been delightful. That's for sure.
You talk about the Charge On tour, going around Sunshine State to all the alumni chapters, or UCF athletics boosters, and talk about Terry Mohajir. You referenced him earlier in the conversation, but we really didn't talk about his background and what he's done in his 4 months or so on the job there in Orlando. What's the initial impressions of Terry Mohajir?
He definitely brings a lot of energy. You look at what he did at Arkansas State, and that's in the Sun Belt Conference, but he got them nice facilities. He's got a lot of connections.
tremendous football hires.
Yes, he's done well there, and that's why we're counting on the Gus one to be another in that long line. But yeah, he's definitely, I think the right guy at the right time too. Danny White will always have a legacy here because of what he did. Because not just hiring the football coaches, every coach he hired is seemed to have the magic touch with. So he's had a good track record there, and Danny White did a lot for UCF. Now, I don't like the fact. Now, we were going to keep him forever. I don't like the fact he went to Tennessee, kind of out of nowhere. But I see why Tennessee wants him, because they're dying, especially with the football program. So, Danny White, had a stance when it came to scheduling. He wanted, straight up 1-for-1 when, South Florida's booking 2-for-1s with a lot of teams, and people are going, well, hey, why aren't we doing that? Now, I understand it and I agree with it mostly. Because again, games at UCF bring a lot of revenue. Games at South Florida do not. And they're renting an NFL stadium, so there's a big difference there. So I see why you don't want to give away all your dates to in 2-for-1 fashion, but I think you have to do a little bit of that to beef up your schedule. So I think Terry Mohajir is going to kind of alter that stance a little bit to get some more impressive teams on the schedule. So I would say, if Danny White had one area that kind of was the dark spot, it was the scheduling, and he's left a little bit of a cleanup for Terry Mohajir in that respect. But I'm confident he can do it. So we'll see how that plays out. So we may have to do some 2-for-1s, but I also get it. UCF's riding high at the time. And I've always said, people criticize UCF for being a little cocky in the fan base in particular. But one of the things I always say, if you want to be big time, you got to act big time. So utilizing that, well, we don't want to do 2-for-1s, kind of plays that into that a little bit. So we'll see where it goes. Maybe some neutral sites to help build the schedule back up. But yeah, everything I've seen from Terry Mohajir, people I've talked to that cover the team, say this guy is the Energizer Bunny, and he's going to do great things.
You talked about scheduling earlier. You were talking about the trips you've made to the likes of Pittsburgh to watch the Knights play. What are some of your favorite road trips in addition to that trip to Pittsburgh? I know down through the years I've had the opportunity to go to several tremendous venues, South Carolina, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, etc., to watch the Pirates play. So what are some of your...
that's good stuff. Been to Georgia Tech twice. Now that's not considered a haven as far as the venue is concerned, but always a fun trip because I've always usually be able to schedule around the Braves. So that kind of always works out a little bit. Been to Georgia, been to Clemson, been to Penn State. I've been to SMU several times, mostly because I have friends out there, and my sister works for Southwest, so I usually have been able to fly for free quite a bit. And matter of fact, probably my all-time favorite road trip was during the 2017 season. The way it worked out, we went out there. UCF SMU. Actually, SMU gave us a game. We had to win it late, and that was great. And then the next day, we're sitting in a suite at Cowboys Stadium watching the Cowboys beat the Chiefs. One of my buddies works for the station that carries the Cowboys, and they have a suite. So that's probably my, once you've been to a suite at a place like that, it's hard to go back in the stands.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So, that's been one of my all-time favorite trips. Pittsburgh was a fun trip, only for the fact that, we went up there a couple days early, watched the Pittsburgh Pirates play. And that's a great baseball stadium.
I've always heard what is it, PNC?
PNC Park. It's a
PNC Park on TV. It looks tremendous. Any videos that I've seen of it, I've heard from folks who have been there. One of my diehard East Carolina friends.
maybe
you said it's somewhere you need to go.
Yeah, definitely. It's the best baseball stadium I've ever been to. And that's, I think that's saying something. And I've been to quite a few of those. Like I said, I've gone to Clemson. Penn State's always a great trip. Like I said, I've gone to every UCF game up there, and going to Happy Valley and being in that stadium is amazing. And then there was a period of time I lived in Knoxville, so I did get to go to one UT game up there, and that's an incredibly insane atmosphere. And
now, what year were you in Knoxville?
So I was in Knoxville between '96 and '98. So I was there during the Peyton Manning era. Yeah, and that was some pretty stuff. I wasn't in broadcasting then, but yeah, it was definitely interesting living in a college town. And that's all they talk about and live and breathe is UT. And so that was a great experience. And so it is interesting when I see, Danny White and Josh Heupel being in Knoxville, and I can imagine, and I think I said it on your show before that if Josh Heupel thought there was a critical nature down here, he's running into a whole different world up there. So
no doubt about it. My dad and I, down through the years, we've gotten a lot of laughs when things have not gone well for Tennessee. Some of their diehard fans calling in to local radio shows where we've come across the interviews on social media and so forth, or just late night when you can get stations from afar. On the AM dial in particular. But so during those times in the mid-90s, you had the opportunity to experience the Vol Navy, I'm assuming?
I didn't actually get to join the Navy, but one of the guys I worked for had a boat and would do that. So I never got an invite, unfortunately. So but not my favorite boss.
even though I'm not a Tennessee fan, just that seems like that would be a neat experience for sure. Right there, beautiful setting on the river.
Oh yeah, if you're a college football fan,
right?
You love the atmosphere of going to these different places.
Like in South Carolina, you got the Cockaboos. That's something else that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. University of Georgia is one of the most beautiful campuses I've ever seen.
No doubt.
That's a tremendous area to go to. So yeah, I always like to take in that flavor. I want to go. I want to go to places like Michigan and Ohio State and see what those are like in person. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think I've never had the opportunity to go to the state of Michigan. Period. I guess the closest I've been to Chicago, but and East Carolina opens the 2023 season at U of M. There in the big house. So if at all possible, I'll definitely be making that trip.
Yeah, UCF's played up there before, and I wish I would have. That would have been pretty cool. And then in conference, I want to go to Navy. I want to see. I want to see.
That's definitely a trip you need to make. I made that trip in I want to say it was 2006 on Skip Holt's second season. Pirates lost 27-23 that day. Very good football game. And one of the few times we've been able to slow them down at all. And just unbelievable, with the march on before the game. It's something that you definitely need to take in addition to Annapolis just being beautiful. And then if you've never been to Army, had the opportunity to go to Army in 1995. And that was a tremendous experience. It was early November. And, the leaves changing colors and the drive there on Saturday morning along the Hudson River, just a thing of beauty.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff. And of course, I've got to get to Greenville too. That's on my list.
I didn't realize you had not made the trip up. Hopefully, maybe next year when the Knights come in the 2022 season, maybe you can make that trip up, and we'd love to have you at my family's tailgate and show you a good time in Greenville.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be a plan.
But really appreciate you being so generous with your time, Jeff. Certainly did not intend to go this long, but you know how it is once you start talking sports, especially on a podcast where you don't have time constraints. It's easy to get carried away. But as always, appreciate the visit, and we look forward to having you back on the show as well as coming on your program down the road.
Sounds good. Yeah. That's the beauty of podcasting, though. You're not stuck to a clock. And my long-windedness probably contributed to this as well, but I certainly enjoyed it. It was a good time, Bubba.
Before we wrap it up, go ahead and plug your show on both the Nightline Sports Network with the AAC report, as well as Jeff Allen Sports Talk. Tell folks how they can listen.
Yes, sir. So the Nightline Sports Network, I host the AAC report. So we cover everything around the American Athletic Conference. Of course, Bubba and Dave and Kyle have been on my show numerous times talking East Carolina sports, and we try to do a fair job of covering everybody. So it's not a UCF focused show, in case you were worried about that. Although we do talk about the Knights from time to time. And then Jeff Allen Sports Talk, which is my program I've been doing since 2015, and it's general sports talk, much like this show that Bubba does. I like to feature a guest and have some fun with it. We close out with a TV theme from days gone by, and you just try to make it a good, fun time. So hope you will catch that when you get a chance. Just search Jeff Allen Sports Talk wherever you find your podcast. We're on many of the platforms out there.
That concludes this edition of the Bubba Rose Show. We appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you listen. Also, be sure to follow us on social media at Bubba Rosenbaum on Twitter, at Bubba Rose Show on Instagram. Like and follow the Bubba Rose Show Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let us hear from you by emailing us at thebubbaroseshow@gmail.com. Again, that's thebubbaroseshow@gmail.com. We'll see you next time, y'all.